Clearly, if we went so far as to default on the debt, it would be a major crisis, because the Treasury security is viewed as the safest and most liquid security in the world. It's the foundation for much of our financial system, and the notion that it would become suddenly unreliable and illiquid would throw shockwaves to the entire global financial system.
And with us now from Washington, Democratic Representative from Missouri and Chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Cleaver. Thank you so much for being with us, Congressman. Great to talk to you.
Sure, good to be here with you.
You know, we are talking about the debt ceiling now. We've been talking about the debt for the past year or so. Before that, we were talking about health care reform, something that we've rarely talked about, Washington, over the past several years, jobs. And in the African-American community especially, the unemployment rate is staggering. Talk about that.
Well, you know, unfortunately, in Washington, we're quite often talking about things that the rest of the country is not that interested in. There's no question we've got to do something about the debt. We've got to do something about bringing spending under control. But we are now 191 days into this new session of Congress, and we've not had any legislation brought to the floor that would create jobs. The Congressional Black Caucus has introduced over 40 pieces of legislation to deal with jobs. We have a crisis in the African American community. I think we have a serious unemployment problem all over the country. But when you look at the unemployment numbers for African Americans at 16.2, those are depression level unemployment numbers. And if you add what the Labor Department considers this U6, where you add in those who have given up and those who are underemployed, that number is almost doubled. And we've just not had any movement in Congress or anywhere else for that matter trying to generate and create opportunities for Americans to go back to work.
Why?
Well, I think that we get into Washington, somebody begins to talk about one issue that is supposed to be important, and all of a sudden all of our energy goes to that. And so we're talking about the debt ceiling. That's it, all day, every day. We are not, I don't think, thinking about the fact that 16.2% of one segment of the American population is unemployed. Look, if we had 16.2% unemployment with TV news host and TV morning show individuals, it'd be terrible.
It'd be a disaster. Exactly.
No question about it. We'd be appointing committees and commissions.
Exactly right. But you know, you talk about a 16% number. That's actually, as you said, especially in the African-American community, that number is skewed so low. It's actually over 30%. If you look at the real numbers, if you look at people that are discouraged, that have given up, this is an epidemic. Nearly
high school dropouts.
High school dropouts. Nearly 1/3 of African Americans, perhaps, unemployed right now. And you start talking about young African American males, and the numbers skyrocket.
It is so bad that I think it merits the president and Congress declaring that this is a national emergency. And if that doesn't happen and happen quickly, I think that we're going to look at a situation where African Americans are actually going to begin to move backwards. I mean, I think over the last 25 years, we've done something in this country that couldn't be done in any other country around the world. But if this continues, this unemployment continues, this dropout rate continues, I'm looking for some serious problems down the road.
And Charles, we talk about competing with China. The United States of America cannot just basically write off 1/3 of its population,
right,
which is in effect what we're doing right now.
Right. And one part of this discussion that doesn't get a lot of traction is a very important one, which is that African American, for the entire population of African Americans that have jobs, 21% of those jobs are in government. Every time you hear someone say we want to cut government, local government's being cut, state government is being cut, you're cutting directly into African American employment. For black men, government is the #1 employer. For black women, it is the #2 employer. Until that has a lot of kind of cultural roots, because for a very long time, the only profession that black people could have to make an in-round around good old boy systems was to go into government to become professionals. So they became teachers and they became all these other things. So when you start cutting off tons of teachers, you've been laying off people in government around the country, not necessarily federal, but local and state governments are cutting and cutting and cutting. Since January 2009, we have shed 500,000 government jobs, mostly on the local and state level. Until you figure out ways that we rectify that, African Americans have a real problem, and there's no sense that that may change.
Well, Congressman, actually, it's not going to change. It's going to get worse, because you look at Andrew Cuomo, who talked about one of his biggest regrets was not making more inroads on cutting benefits. Obviously, all of the states right now, or most of the states, are undergoing a fiscal crisis. So this actually makes your initiatives all the more critical to talk about getting African Americans in the private sector, figuring out, you're talking about job fairs. What are some other concrete initiatives the Congressional Black Caucus is doing right now?
Well, two things. We're going to do this jobs fair. We're going to go all around the country. We'll begin in Cleveland on August 8th and end up in Los Angeles at the end. And we're bringing in people from all over everywhere. We have a large number of major corporations that have committed themselves to providing jobs, real jobs, and our goal is to get 10,000 jobs, which might not sound like a lot of jobs, but in this economy, I think it's significant.
Wow, it is.
But one of the things that I think is important, we presented to the president our ideas that if you put 20% of the money from grant-making agencies, federal agencies, into areas where there's been 30 years of persistent poverty, we can begin to make some changes. And just so the viewers understand, the number one area that would qualify is an area in Kentucky that is not represented by an African American. The state of Missouri, for example, the most poverty-stricken area in the state of Missouri is represented by Joe and Emerson, whom you know. Right. And not Kansas City or St. Louis. And so we think that it helps people, not necessarily by race, but by their situation, their condition, and we do it on the basis of census tracts. So I think this is the way to move, and we are excited about the possibility that almost every major company in the nation has signed up to provide jobs.
That is great, and John Heilman, as the Congressman said, 10,000 new jobs for African Americans, and as the Congressman said, for others, whether it's in Joe and Emerson's district or others, in this economy, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. And I just wanted to see if I can get in one quick one with the Congressman before we go. You twice mentioned the president, Congressman Cleaver, and of course he is the first African-American president. Are you satisfied with the degree of leadership that he's provided on this issue, or are you disappointed?
Well, the president has a plate that is dripping with so many issues on it, and of course we would like to have the president contribute to this process a little more, but we also understand his situation. We need the White House ultimately to be involved if we're going to deal with this problem in an effective way.
All right, Congressman Cleaver, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Good luck to you.
And I'll tell you what, we'd love to get a copy, and we're going to reach out to your office, love to get a copy of these areas that have had chronic unemployment over the past 30 years, and love to put it up on our website.
We'll send it to you.
Thank you, sir. Coming up next, will Republicans